It bears repeating that video game adaptations are incredibly difficult to make, even for talented writers, the main reason being that the game itself will often have minimal story to begin with. However, Resident Evil is not like that. The games in that series have a fairly comprehensive storyline. Of course, none of that matters if the show creators decide to completely ignore it, which of course is exactly what they did. This show is Resident Evil in name only. The truth is that it's just a low effort, poorly written, generic zombie series filled with woke garbage that happens to have a famous name taped onto the side in order to hope to increase viewership. Here's a spoiler for you, it didn't work. Resident Evil is bad. Episode 1. A quick note about my videos in this series, I'm going to watch one episode at a time, followed by a review video. This is so that I can try to make predictions on what I think is going to happen later on in the series, and also, I have a feeling that watching more than one episode of this show in a single sitting is probably not all that good for your health, either physically or mentally.
You sure I should do this, man?
The show begins by telling us it's the year 2036 and that it's 14 years after the end of the world and everything pretty much looks destroyed. We're then introduced to this character, and you might be asking, who the hell is this? And where are all the characters that people actually care about, like Leon, Chris, Claire, or Jill? Well, as it turns out, none of them are in the show. Instead, we get a bunch of diversity-approved nobodies that absolutely no one will care about, like this clown with the bad haircut. In the animal kingdom, there are certain kinds of warning signs that tell you to probably stay away from certain things, whether it's smells or sounds or bright colors or other kinds of visual indicators. And if you happen to ever see a female character with this style of haircut, that's one of them, because it is 100% guaranteed that the character will be completely unlikable, utterly insufferable, and in general, just an annoying bitch. And what do you know? That's exactly what this character turns out to be.
I am shocked and appalled.
Her name is supposed to be Jade, but given how dumb and annoying she is, I think calling her Joke would be more appropriate. Regardless, she's having a video call with someone who appears to be her husband and daughter. I find this a bit strange considering that this is a post-apocalyptic world with minimal resources and nearly the entire infrastructure for both power and communications has been destroyed. So I'm not exactly sure how this pristine high-bandwidth communication could even be happening. We learn that she's been away from her family for about 6 months doing some kind of experiments with zombies and rabbits. She ends the call and then heads out to conduct one of these experiments, and you might think, hey, it's probably a good idea to bring some weapons or something considering there's zombies everywhere, but no, the only thing that she has to ward off the zombies is some sort of perfume in a bottle, and it's some kind of anti-zombie spray.
A fool's substitute for intelligence.
Even if we assume that the spray is incredibly effective, don't you think it would still probably be a good idea to take some kind of a weapon with you, like a bat or a pipe, or hell, even just a long sharpened stick might do? But nope, all she does is use the zombie spray. I wonder if this is gonna come up and be a problem later on.
Can you see where this is going?
She finds a spot and sets up the camera and puts down a rabbit in a patch of grass, and then she pricks its ears so there's a little bit of blood, and this is what's supposed to attract the zombies. Now, you might think that perhaps she would have some sort of secure position from which to watch the zombies, maybe even, climb up a ladder or get on top of something, but no, she doesn't do any of that. Instead, she just sets up about 20 feet away on the ground with absolutely no protection at all.
You don't have a better bad idea than this?
This is the best bad idea we have, sir.
Eventually, a large group of zombies show up, and I have to point out that these are hilariously bad in every possible way. The movements of the zombie actors could best be described as cartoonish. The makeup prosthetics are incredibly low quality, and oh yeah, let's not forget that all of the zombies run like that weird kid pretending to be a ninja at a comic convention.
I know Kung Fu.
All of this seems more akin to a low-budget fan film rather than what it actually is, a very expensive TV show. Regardless, the zombies chase after the rabbit, which manages to get away. Joke is disappointed, and as she stands up to leave, she accidentally cuts herself. This blood then causes all of the zombies in the area to notice her. It seems on hindsight that spending 30 seconds to climb up on top of something to have a slightly more secure position and to put you out of biting range probably would have been a good idea. Regardless, we can figure out kind of what's going on with these types of zombies. It seems like they're not capable of seeing anything, and they really don't seem to have much of a sense of hearing either. Instead, they go off almost entirely on a sense of smell. And I want you to remember this, because in about a minute, it's about to become extremely stupid. Joke starts running away and goes up a set of stairs. Some of the zombies trip, but the rest of them follow her running Naruto style. One of them manages to catch up and tackles her. Then the zombie pretends as if he's going to bite her, but you can very clearly see that the zombie actor is not actually trying to bite her. He's deliberately holding his head back and away from her, and he's just snapping his teeth. Realistically, she should be done for. A larger zombie tackled her to the ground and was on top of her. There's no way for her to escape. She doesn't have any weapon. The zombie should have just immediately started biting into her, but instead, it just kind of like wiggled around a little bit and like chomped its jaws up and down. It doesn't make any sense. It's very obvious what the show creators are trying to do here. They want to create the illusion of suspense as if she's actually in danger, but really, the zombie should have already bitten her by now. But they can't have that happen because if they did, then they wouldn't have a show. So they have to come up with this really absurd-looking situation. And really, what it does is it reminds me of what happened in the Obi-Wan series when the mercenaries had to pretend to not be able to run as fast as a 10-year-old, and they couldn't catch up to Leia. It's painfully obvious what was happening there, and it's the same thing that's happening here. But don't worry, it gets worse. Remember, this wasn't the only zombie that was chasing after her. There were about 50 of them, and as we've already been able to figure out, they don't go by sense of sight, they go by sense of smell, and this is also confirmed later on in the episode. So even though Joke had been knocked to the ground, and the other zombies wouldn't be able to see her, they could definitely still smell her. So you might be asking, during the time that she was on the ground fighting with the zombie, what were the other 49 zombies doing? As it turns out, not a damn thing.
We're perfectly normal.
You can clearly see in the background that when Joke gets tackled, every single other zombie completely stops moving forward and then just stands in place waiting their turn. I can't help but be reminded of those old cliche kung fu movie tropes where a bunch of bad guys surround the main character and then they all decide to fight one at a time instead of just rushing in.
No! One at a time, or you run into each other. It could get confusing.
This entire scene is incredibly contrived, and it fails on every level. But Joke eventually manages to escape from underneath the other zombie that was not biting her for some reason, and she activates a fire system that burns up every zombie in the area. So it seems like she's going to be safe, but suddenly the ground starts shaking, and a monster appears in the form of a giant caterpillar. Oh, don't worry, it gets even dumber, because then the giant caterpillar begins to roar like Godzilla. We're not even 5 minutes into the show, and I'm already rooting for the zombies to win. The screen cuts away, and now it's time for a flashback. Get used to it, because it's going to happen about 50 times throughout the entire episode. So it flashes back to the year 2022, and the location is New Raccoon City, which means there must be an old Raccoon City as well, and if memory serves, that place was destroyed because of the zombies. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense for this place to be called New Raccoon City when the outbreak hasn't happened yet. Basically, it's just that the writers wanted to include the name for nostalgia bait, since it clearly has no connection to the original city. We're going to get to see a younger version of Joke, as well as her sister Billy and their father, and they're driving along to their new home. And right away we learn that Joke is a huge racist. She refers to a group of white people that they drive by as a group of freaks, and then asks, why are there so many white people in the area?
You little fucking racist.
Don't worry though, because clearly this is the good kind of racism. And speaking of that subject, we learn that Joke's father is none other than... Hold on, let me check notes. Albert Wesker?
Is he though?
Wait, hang on a second, that can't be right. Looking at these two pictures, I can't quite help but notice that there's some small differences between the two. I can't quite put my finger on it. I'm not really sure. I mean, there's something about these two characters. I don't know. Can you figure it out? I bet you can.
He's black?
Of course, this is because the show creators have decided to take this character to the Hollywoke laundromat for some good old-fashioned racist blackwashing. Apparently, Hollywood doesn't seem to think that the whole race swapping thing is much of an issue anymore. And on that note, I can't wait to see Ryan Gosling take over as the new Black Panther. I mean, after all, if it's okay to make changes in one direction, it must be okay to make changes in the other. Right?
I double down!
We're then introduced to the character of Carol, and she tells the family a little bit about the area and says that they're gonna love it there because there are 5 cupcake shops and 2 of them are vegan, which I have to admit is a very strange way of saying we only have 3 cupcake shops. Joke then begins insulting Carol for pretty much no reason, making her even more unlikable, and then Joke throws a temper tantrum and storms outside where her sister Billy has to try to calm her down. But it gets even dumber because Joke says how much she hates being there, but at least the guys are hot. And keep in mind that she's referring to the same group of white guys that not even a minute ago she called freaks and asked why there were so many of them. So not only is Joke a huge racist, she's also written inconsistently because, you know, the show creators don't know what they're doing. Everything about this character so far is awful. We move back to the present where she's still being chased by the giant caterpillar. She makes a half-hearted attempt to hide under a car where the caterpillar obviously sees her and then drags her out. Then it picks her up and swings her around, slamming her into the car head first. So I guess this means that the show is over already because there is absolutely no way that she survived that. Seriously, take a look at this. There is no way that you walk away from that. But the stupidity doesn't stop. The caterpillar doesn't even attempt to eat her. Instead, it continues roaring into the sky like Godzilla until a group of people show up and begin shooting at it, and they manage to kill it fairly easily. One of the group goes to check on Joke's condition, and he says that she probably has internal bleeding and definitely a concussion. And I want you to remember that, because it's going to come up later. And basically, here's a hint. This show has about as much consistency as it does quality. In other words, none. It then moves into another flashback where we get several more minutes of the two sisters just sitting and talking about a bunch of boring shit that no one cares about. But finally, we actually get a little bit of plot development, and we see that their father, the hotel guy from John Wick, has been taking blood samples of his daughters and apparently injecting them into himself.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
The next day, the sisters go to school, and for whatever bizarre reason, a completely random person walks up to Billy and then just starts picking on her and insulting her. And even though it doesn't make any sense at all, we finally get the first and probably only intelligent thing ever said in this entire show.
Oh, I'm vegan. That's stupid.
Nice.
I can tell you right now, that clip is definitely getting saved for future use. There are a few more insults, and then the two girls start fighting. Unfortunately, this leads into several more minutes of the sisters just sitting and talking.
No! No!
We're now about 30 minutes into this episode, and a good chunk of it has just been these two idiots sitting around and talking about their feelings and giving some really dumb exposition. And I have to admit, when I think of Resident Evil, this is definitely not it. Back in the present, Joke finally wakes up, and apparently she is completely fine somehow.
Piss on that.
Hey, remember about 5 minutes ago when this happened? That incident probably should have killed her, or at a minimum would have given her massive head injury. Even that other guy admitted to it. But instead, she just gets up off the bed and acts as if nothing is wrong. The most that she does is move a little slow for a few seconds and then do some stretching. This is what you would expect to see from someone who had a bad night's sleep on a couch, not someone who just had their head caved in on a car.
Logic is an integral part of narrative structure.
But she's a girl boss, so she can just walk it off. And if you didn't think you could hate this character even more, just wait a few seconds. She then starts snooping around the area, and one of the guys who rescued her shows up in the tent, and his name is Tate. She immediately becomes a complete bitch to him for no reason. Remember, he risked his life to save her. His group gave her life-saving medical care. Not only does this bitch not thank him, she doesn't show any appreciation at all, and even tries to boss him around.
Real quick, just go fuck yourself.
And here's the thing, it's incredibly transparent what the writers were trying to do in this scene. They wanted to make Joke look like she was a strong, independent woman. She don't need no man. But that's not the case. She's just garbage. Just as the stupid haircut indicates, she is an unlikable and insufferable bitch.
And the truth shall set you free!
And now we get another flashback. We end up seeing Hotel Guy watching a video of what appears to be a zombie outbreak, and we learn that this is not the first time that it's happened. Meanwhile, his daughters are involved in a fight with the bully, and both of the fathers get called into the office, and the other guy starts making threats towards Billy, and then Hotel Guy explains how important he is at Umbrella, and that he's the only one that can do his job, and if he wants, he can get the other father fired with just a single phone call. And I'll be honest, this one thing wasn't awful. Hotel Guy actually does a pretty decent job in this scene, and I'm not really surprised because he is a good actor, and he's, in fact, the only good actor in this entire dumpster fire of a TV show, and he gets completely wasted on this garbage. Still, however, it doesn't excuse the fact that the character that he's playing was racistly blackwashed, so I mean, there is that.
That's not an opinion, it's a fact.
Moving back into the present, we get an exposition dump from Joke where she girl-splains to Tate how the zombies work, because apparently everyone else on the planet is too stupid to realize the obvious about how the zombies are able to actually find people. And in this case, the zombies, by the way, are referred to as zeros. So she says that the T-virus doesn't actually kill people, instead it rewires their brains, and it makes them go blind and deaf, but gives them an extremely strong sense of smell, which is what they use to find prey. Again, this is ridiculously obvious, and Tate and everyone else on the planet should already know this. Just then, a message arrives saying that agents from Umbrella are headed to the base, because apparently they have a bounty on anyone that survives from New Raccoon City, and Joke happens to be one of those survivors. Suddenly, Tate has guns pointed at Joke because he plans to turn her over to Umbrella for the reward. And I'm sure with what we know about the writers, that having the first completely blatantly evil person in the entire series be a white guy is purely a coincidence.
Note the lack of surprise.
And then we get another stupid flashback with yet more incredibly boring sitting and talking with the two sisters, and they're planning to break into the ultra-secure Umbrella facility so that they can steal some test rabbits and release them. This is going to get really dumb, and we'll talk about that later. Then it jumps back into the present with Umbrella finally arriving at the base in several helicopters. A bunch of Umbrella soldiers start moving around the base, and a big fat white guy shows up to talk to Tate. But rather than giving him the reward, he just shoots Tate in the head. So a white guy named Tate, who risked his life to save the stupid bitch of a main character, suddenly becomes evil, only to be unceremoniously killed off by another, more evil white guy. You know, I think the writers might have some sort of a personal bias? I can't quite put my finger on it.
Oh, you can smell the shit from 5 miles away.
Regardless, then the fat guy orders his men to take out everyone in the base, and we get another stupid flashback, and the sisters have now gone to the Umbrella facility, which for some reason has virtually no security at all. There are no guards, there's only a single camera on the outside door, and the entire locking mechanism is easily tricked by using the key card, and Billy just kind of putting her hat down a little bit to cover her face. Keep in mind, this is a state-of-the-art billion-dollar facility operated by a trillion-dollar company working on some of the most hazardous stuff to ever exist, with absolutely no security guards whatsoever, a single camera on the exterior door that is made of glass that can be broken by a rock.
This is terrible.
But don't worry, it gets worse, because then Joke finds a computer and manages to log into the system using her father's credentials. She puts in his name and then his password, which is Spock21.
Most illogical.
Now, I'm not sure if they're going to give an explanation for this dumb password later on, But I do have a hard time believing that the incredibly intelligent hotel guy who's in charge of pretty much the entire facility is still using an AOL password from the late 90s.
A character's actions must flow inexorably from his or her established traits.
This allows Joke to easily find and watch that zombie video that we saw earlier on. Meanwhile, Billy uses the hotel guy's access card to open one of the animal cages, which turns out to be a zombie dog. But don't worry, it gets worse. The zombie dog attacks these two idiots, and they barely manage to escape into an elevator that takes them back to the ground floor. However, while they're standing around in the lobby trying to catch their breath, the zombie dog starts attacking the stairwell door from the inside. So let me get this straight. We're supposed to believe that the dog saw them go into the elevator and somehow figured out that it was going to take them to the lobby. Then the dog was smart enough to open the door to the stairwell, where it climbed all of the stairs up to the lobby, but then somehow miraculously forgot how to open that door, and now it can't get into the lobby and instead has to bang on the door.
You must think me a fool to make your lies so transparent.
Also, remember that the zombies track by sense of smell, and the scent of these two idiots would have been in the elevator shaft, not in the stairwell. So there's no reason for the dog to have tried to track them through the stairwell where they never went to, and their smell, their scent wouldn't have been. So for the people writing this show, why are you bothering to establish rules if you have no intention on following them? You morons. Eventually, the dog is able to break down the steel door, and then the two idiots decide that the best place they could possibly hide is in a conference room with glass walls.
Congratulations, you're a failure.
We as the audience know that the zombies function on smell and not sight, so hiding behind a glass wall wouldn't actually be a big deal. However, these characters don't know that, so either the writers messed up or they decided to make their characters unbelievably stupid. In either case, I can't quite understand the logic of these two characters trying to hide behind glass walls. Also, since the scene has moved into a brighter area, I think now's a good time to point out that the zombie dog is entirely made out of CGI, and it looks like it was rendered on the original PlayStation. It is complete and utter ass. Regardless, the bad CGI eventually catches up with these idiots and manages to bite Billy. Joke kills the bad CGI by hitting it with a fire extinguisher. Billy is unresponsive and completely unconscious. It seems that she might have died, but I don't think that's the case. And also, I don't see how it could have possibly happened, since the bad CGI only managed to bite her in the shoulder. And as it turns out, the next scene gives us an answer to that. Moving back into the present, Joke is finally surrounded by Umbrella. The fat white guy says that her sister is looking for her, but Joke won't allow herself to be taken captive, so since she's such a strong, independent woman, she decides to jump off the top of the building and goes outside with all the zombies. It should be noted that the place she's jumping off of is probably 40 to 50 feet off the ground, and there is absolutely no way that she's going to walk away from it. She's either going to be dead or severely injured, in which case the zombies rush her, and then she's dead. But then again, Joke did manage to somehow survive this, and healed her internal bleeding and massive head trauma with just a little bit of light stretching.
That is one big pile of shit.
But we'll have to wait to see what happens with all that stupidity in the next episode. And speaking of stupid, this show is beyond stupid. Even if you set aside all of the blatant woke trash from the writers, this show itself is just awful and boring. It's so very boring. Who the hell wants to watch a show called Resident Evil that spends most of its time with two extremely unlikable teenage girls just sitting around and talking? To make it worse is the situation with the flashbacks that are constantly jumping back and forth, back and forth. It's very annoying and disruptive. If you need to do flashbacks, then generally it should be handled sparingly, and it should be done after the audience has already been hooked into the show. So you would have the first episode where it builds up a bunch of stuff and generates a lot of questions like, how did this happen? Where did this person go? And then in the second episode, you can show a flashback and answer a bunch of those questions. But if you have it so that the first episode is just a disruptive, annoying mess where it just keeps going back and forth, that's not really a good way to handle it. Because with the way the series does it, it makes it hard to get invested in the plot or the characters, what very little there actually is of character development. And that leads to the next thing. The characters are awful. Joke is extraordinarily bad. I don't see how anyone could ever possibly like this character. It's quite telling when the audience is hoping that your main character falls into a pit and gets eaten by zombies. This is by far one of the worst video game adaptations I have ever seen. But thankfully, that's the end of episode 1.